Thank you very much, and good afternoon. I want to thank Tom for his kind words and sponsorship. I want to thank Barry for inviting me to be here today, and to all who are with Chamber leadership. It's good to be back visiting with you. I had a wonderful experience working with my local chamber when I was mayor of Richmond, and then as I served as lieutenant governor and governor, the chance to work with the chamber on a lot of projects was really important. You played a key role, the chamber, in 2004 when I was lieutenant governor working with Mark Warner to do what was a controversial thing, which was reforming the state tax code to find more money for education, and the chamber stood with us in that important time. You helped me in 2008 when I was governor and decided in the midst of a recession that the right thing to do was to expand construction on our higher ed institutions to the tune of about $1.5 billion. And over the summer, you played an instrumental role, I think, as Congress was wrestling with whether to default on America's debt obligations. This chamber stood up strong and said, no, we elected leaders not only to lead but also to compromise and work together, and the chamber's role in pushing that was very, very helpful. And so it's a treat to be with you today. I came right as Ray LaHood spoke and had a chance to hear him and to hear Sam and Terry, who have been old friends, and it's Sean and Terry, and it's just great to be back and have a chance to talk about a very timely topic. I understand I miss Steve Fuller, who is giving you some realistic but not necessarily positive news, and I'm not going to sugarcoat the challenges we have, but I am going to talk a little bit about optimism, which I think is in short supply in the nation right now, but needn't be because of the history that we've all lived through and some of the opportunities we have before us. The topic of the day is the role of the federal government in Virginia's economic prosperity. And let me just give you 3 data points. Forbes.com. For 4 years in a row, Virginia was the #1 best state for business in America. For the last 2 years, we've been #2. #2 isn't bad. #2 is very good. 48 states would love to be that high. But we slipped for an important reason, and Forbes came out with their #2 ranking this week. And what they said was Virginia has a strong and well-educated labor force. That's a good thing. Virginia has a very favorable business and regulatory climate. That's a good thing. But Virginia has slipped because the prospect of federal budget cuts makes the outlook hazy for Virginia. Second, state budget. Discussions are going on right now. We've got legislators here about the state budget and about the need to do significant budget cutting right now. Some of the reason for that budget cutting is because of the end date on the Recovery Act dollars that were helping the Virginia budget and other states' budgets through calendar year 2011. Third, Ray LaHood talked about Rail to Dulles, this wonderful project with orange cones right near us that's going to be a spectacular one that would not have been possible were it not for a significant effort, local, state, but certainly federal. So the Forbes ranking and the challenges in the state budget and the reality of Rail to Dulles being built right outside the door here tells us the United States and Virginia are absolutely critical partners. It's about jobs, it's about contracts, it's about our nation's security, it's about veterans who get pensions, it's about the disabled and seniors who get Medicaid, Medicare, or Social Security, it's about research and development, it's about transportation, and it's also about talent. The most precious resource in the world, not water, not oil, talent. The presence of federal agencies like DARPA and others that have been innovators have helped us attract talent to Virginia and have been one of the reasons why Virginia has been one of the states with the lowest unemployment rates and highest median incomes, even in a very tough time. There is one attitude that says that the right strategy to take is to fight Washington. I got a different attitude. I think we need to fix Washington. The partnership between Virginia and the United States is incredibly important. It's been especially helpful in modern Virginia since World War II. What we need to do is endeavor to make it work better. And to make it work better, I think what we have to do is fix 3 very serious Washington dysfunctions, and each of them can be fixed by applying some Virginia lessons. So let me talk about the 3 lessons. Washington, to be fixed, has to learn from Virginia how to work together. We have to learn how to find fiscal balance, and we have to learn to fight tomorrow's challenges rather than rehashing yesterday's battles. On working together. I think this is the single greatest problem we have in Washington right now. It's an unwillingness to find common ground. The flame out of the super committee is just the most recent, whether it was coming to the brink of a government shutdown or coming to the brink of defaulting on debt obligations, or the flame out of the super committee recently, and everybody has their idea about how to allocate blame or culpability, but the right thing to say is it was everybody's fault. If you can't work together, nobody should get credit, and everybody shares in the blame. It was an embarrassment to have something and call it a super committee and have the super committee turn into Mighty Mouse at the end and not being able to do anything. Here's a little data point that I find interesting. John Warner, who is a very dear family friend and a friend of so many in this room, at the end of his time as a U.S. Senator, some of you remember, John Warner was part of a gang of 14 members of the Senate who would work in bipartisan ways to break through log jams on appointments and other things. Mark Warner, my friend of 31 years, is today a member of a gang of 5 or 6, depending on the day. It's not a good sign that the bipartisan gang was 14 5 years ago and it's 5 or 6 today. That's just a little bit of a sign of the times, that the people who will willingly sign up and put their name to it, to the bipartisan gang, is shrinking. I will tell you this, if I have the opportunity to serve in this capacity I'm running for, if the gang is 1.5, I'm going to be part of the gang. We've got to elect people who know how to work together. Let's learn a Virginia lesson. We know how to work together here. Those accolades, best state for business, best managed state, best state for education, I'd like to say it was because we had a great governor. I think I had something to do with it. But I had 2 Republican houses my first 2 years, and I had a Republican and Democratic house my second 2 years. We only made things happen by working together. And that doesn't mean we always agreed. There was plenty we didn't agree on. But we didn't let disagreement on an issue poison the relationship. So if we disagreed on transportation funding today, we would agree on the biggest bond package for higher ed tomorrow. If we disagreed on nonpartisan redistricting tomorrow, we would agree on preserving open space or banning smoking in restaurants and bars or Chesapeake Bay the next day. You've got to come together, and you've got to elect people who are willing to do it. In 2008, meeting in this room helped me with something that was challenging. I proposed, in the middle of this very tough recession, a massive construction project to build classes and labs on Virginia's college campuses. People even in my own party said, hey, we're in a recession now. Is this the right time to do this? I went to the Republican chair of the House Appropriations Committee, Lacey Putney, who is a wonderful elected official, the longest serving member of the General Assembly in the history of Virginia and maybe America. I went to him and said, I would love if you would carry this bill in the House. And he said, Governor, I can't carry it because you haven't convinced me yet. Now, you may convince me, but you haven't convinced me yet. Over the course of the session, he and I worked together, Speaker Howell and others. We took that bill, we massaged it, we took sandpaper to it, we made it better. At the end of the day, we passed it, and there are construction projects going on every college campus in Virginia now that are employing people and building the classrooms and labs that we need for tomorrow. In Virginia, we know how to work together. We got to do it in Washington. Second thing we have to do is find fiscal balance. Standard & Poor's downgraded America's bond rating in August, first time that's ever happened. And they cited as the reason for the downgrade primarily congressional dysfunction. It was congressional threats of brinksmanship, members of Congress saying, who cares if we don't meet our debt obligations, that led them to say, we're not confident about the direction this thing is going, and so we're going to downgrade America's credit rating. When you look at Washington, you see a prevalence of, I'll just be blunt and say gimmicks. The Grover Norquist no tax pledges, brinksmanship over the debt ceiling, notions that we can solve our deficit problems purely through cuts, which will devastate defense and other industries that are critical to Virginia. Cuts are really important, but nobody has ever just cut their way to prosperity. The Virginia example is this. We've had a AAA. We are the best managed state in America. Why? We're the best because we have a balanced approach to spending and taxes. When I was governor, I had to make $5 billion of spending cuts because I was governor in a tough time. I assure you, if you look back, I did not run for governor with the bumper sticker, we'll cut more than anyone who's ever been governor of Virginia. That was not my, plan. But that was the time I lived in, and we figured out a way to do it working together. But at the same time as we were cutting, we were investing. We were putting more into technical education, more into pre-K, higher ed bond packages, rail to Dulles, light rail in Norfolk, intermodal rail, freight rail facilities in Roanoke, expanded Amtrak service. We were cutting, but at the same time as we were cutting, we were also investing. You've got to do both. And with respect to taxes, you know, that horrible word in politics in American life. When I was mayor, I cut real estate taxes and utility taxes and B-poll taxes. When I got to state government in 8 years as lieutenant governor and governor, I worked to cut some taxes, eliminated the estate tax. That was me working with the legislature that brokered that deal in 2006 because a majority of states don't have an estate tax. And we're in the minority in Virginia, and it was only producing about 1% of our income. It didn't make sense to be anti-competitive in that way. We eliminated income taxes for tens of thousands of Virginians, but I also worked with Mark Warner in 2004 to increase taxes. We shifted some around, some went down and some went up, but because we needed it to have a vigorous K-12 system. We needed it to have a vigorous higher ed system. As governor, I worked and we got an increase in the gas tax on diesel fuel because we needed it for transportation projects. If anybody tells you the right answer is you always have to cut taxes and you can never look at revenue, you can never even let a temporary tax cut like the Bush tax cuts expire, if anybody tells you that, they are telling you they just want to take a meat axe to cut things, including things that are very, very important. America needs to be more like Virginia. We've got to have a balanced attitude about find cuts where we can but make investments, find tax reductions where they make sense but not be afraid to seek more revenue if the priorities and the times demand it. The third challenge that I think Virginia can teach the nation, and then I'll conclude, is this. We got to win tomorrow's challenges and not rehash yesterday's battles. I think the world has changed an awful lot in the last 10 or 15 years, but I don't think Washington and especially Congress has changed with it. And I think there's a lot of things I see across the river and some of the standard, we got procedural maneuvers, we got filibuster perfectionists and expanders, we've got, you know, all kinds of gimmicks, but I don't see people really focusing on the challenges of tomorrow. Too much time is fighting the stale political battles of yesterday. I'll tell you what I think the biggest issue for this nation is right now. It's talent and brain power. That is the single biggest issue that we have to deal with as a nation if we're going to have the kind of future that we want. You know, the United States was #1 20 years ago in the percentage of adults with higher education degrees, 2-year, 4-year, or technical. And there wasn't really even a close second. The investments we made, and they were investments, through the GI Bill, rocketed America forward in the skill set of our population. Well, guess what? That was 20 years ago. Today, America's #12 in the world in the percentage of adults that get higher ed degrees, by some measures as low as 15th or 16th, and we're declining because our rate is flat and even declining a little bit, and other nations are continuing to invest and pass us by. This is a major fire alarm that should be ringing in everybody's ears, because this nation cannot have the best economy. We can't even have an economy that we really like much if we're mediocre in education and talent. We need an Apollo mission to retake our position as the best educated nation on earth. And this is about education from pre-kindergarten to post-graduation, career and technical, workforce development. It's also about research and development. It's also about immigration policy, which we have to think about is how do we get the most talented people in the world to want to come here and produce here. The Virginia lesson on this is so powerful. In the 1950s, we were in the bottom 10 in the nation in median income, and by some measures we're as high as 7th today. There is no state that has moved as far as Virginia have in the lifetime of people in this room in terms of median income. That's a pretty impressive thing when you think about it. We've come a long way, so why not let America learn something from the state that's moved from back of the pack to front of the pack? How did we do it? Was it taxes and regulation? Good news is Virginia has very fair and business-friendly tax and regulatory policies. But you know what, folks? We were low tax and low regulation and poor in the 1950s. It wasn't the tax and regulatory policy that rocketed us forward. We made a decision after we fought battles to keep kids with different skin colors from sitting next to each other, after we decided we would let women come into our colleges, after we decided to build community colleges within 20 or 25 miles of every Virginian, we made a decision to stop fighting the battles of the past and become a talent state. And we built our own talent, and then we attracted talent, and then we attracted businesses who wanted to be near talent. I had a great economic development thing that happened when I was governor. You know, we were able to, in the worst recession in 70 years, get Hilton, Midwest-Vaco, SAIC, CSC, and Volkswagen of North America all to move their corporate headquarters from other states to Virginia in a recession, and we even got Northrop Grumman to say they were coming. They didn't plant the real estate until after I was done, but they made the announcement that they were coming before. And you know, we did all kinds of economic development deals, and what enabled us to win was our people. That's what enabled us to win. I was dealing once with a company, a German auto parts manufacturer, Continental, that had 2 plants in the United States, one in Newport News, and Barry knows it from his Newport News days, and one in South Carolina. And Barry, as you'll know from what they do, auto parts manufacturing, tough business. It had been very, very tough to sell auto parts, and Continental decided that they needed to close one plant and keep one open. And so they came and they said, make your best case. And you know what? Virginia got outbid on the incentive package. We don't have the biggest incentives, but we can often win projects otherwise. And so the night before I was going to get the call from the CEO about this, my team, Pat Gottschalk was my Secretary of Commerce, they called and said, you're going to get this call, you got to make Virginia's case, and we're outbid by a couple of $1 million, Pat. I think that was basically the range of reason. I asked him, well, what am I going to say to get him to come to Virginia? His response was, you better think of something. So when they called the next day, they said, Governor, we're going to make a decision. South Carolina's put more money on the table. Can you put more money on the table? I said, I can't. We've got all these programs. I've given you everything I can. Then why should we come to Virginia? And what I told them was this. I said, look, if this is a short-term decision for you, then I think that incentive package is pretty attractive. And I'm not sure that I can tell you something that's going to make you decide you want to come here. But if it's a long-term decision, you take a look at the percentage of kids in the Virginia and South Carolina systems that take and pass AP exams. You take a look at average SAT scores. You take a look at the workforce development system or the college system. You take a look at all of those things, and then you think about the fact that these are your workers. These are where your workers are going to come from, and in fact, it's where your own kids are going to go to school. And if you think about that, if it is a long-term decision, I don't even really think it's a close decision. Now, they never told me why they did it, but 2 weeks later, they decided we're closing South Carolina down and we're going to be in Virginia. That's what we need to do as a nation. If we get the talent part of this right, then everything else is going to flow the right direction. And let me just conclude and say this. It's been interesting being a candidate for the first time. I ran 7 races from 1994 to 2005, but then I haven't been on a ballot since then. This is a very different time to be a candidate for elected office. You face a lot more skepticism. Now, skepticism about politics and politicians, I completely get that. We've given people plenty of evidence for skepticism. But when you meet people who were the boosters and the rock-solid promoters of metropolitan areas around this Commonwealth, and they're skeptical about our institutions working, or in some instances, maybe even expressing the idea that maybe our nation's best days are in the rear view instead of the windshield. And I've heard that over the last few months in ways that I had never heard before. It draws you up. But I got to tell you, I'm not a skeptic. I'm not a Pollyanna, but I'm not a skeptic because I know this. As an amateur student of history, we've been through tougher times than this as a country. A lot tougher times. And we've been through tougher times than this as a Commonwealth. And we've managed to come out fine. Now, we haven't come out fine by accident. It doesn't just automatically happen. There's no magic beans that plant and then suddenly things, get better. You've got to make hard decisions that can be tough in the short term to do the right thing by the long term. But there is no reason to believe that we can't have better days ahead than we've had in the past. The other reason I'm an optimist is this, and I suspect many of you are in this room feel the same way. Spend some time with some young people. Young people have a lot of reason to be anxious because the job market is so tough. But go to an OCS graduation at Quantico and see how you feel. Or talk to youngsters who are taking great educations and deciding to do Teach for America to help others have great opportunities. Or talk to young entrepreneurs who are even in a tough time or starting up businesses. I do this kind of thing all the time. Those of us in the leadership generation can't afford to let any skepticism rain on the parade of the up-and-comers who are really excited and who are very proud and optimistic about this country. So listen, this is great to have a chance to be back with the Chamber. We've got some great Virginia lessons that I think if we apply can fix what we need to fix in Washington, and we'll have great days ahead. Appreciate it very much.